Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Carrie Muggs. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Spunky Spirit. I am Carrie Muggs, and this week we are going to talk about soul retrieval. So I touched on it a little bit last week when I was talking about why I think places are haunted, or why I think souls are stuck sometimes, or not necessarily stuck, but parts of souls are, and why places have a different energy. And so people were kind of interested in this fragmented soul or soul retrieval thing. So today we're going to kind of talk about it. It's just kind of soul retrieval. It's healing your soul. It's when you kind of feel like a loss of purpose, or you feel kind of drained or confused. And don't get this mixed up with, I always talk, there's a fine line between mental health and spiritual awakening. And so if you are having troubles with these things and you can't take care of them yourself, it is okay to seek help. It is okay to seek counsel and medication. So talk to a doctor, talk to mental health people. But this is kind of what soul retrieval is, and how to heal your soul. And we're going to get into why people call it shadow work. So a soul retrieval is when parts of our soul disconnect, or they just some people call it soul fragments, some people call it disconnection, some people call it, we just lose parts of our soul. And shamans fully believe that this happens during times of trauma in our life, because the veil between our conscious self and our souls, it's really thin when we're first born, but it thickens over time until we kind of forget who we are, the deeper part of us, and that deeper part existed. And during this journey, we forget our authentic selves and our personal purposes. We change to be more acceptable. We betray our values. We let others shape us. We let others tell us who we're supposed to be, or give us, and this is a lot of where the labels come in. A lot of labels like there's controversy on this, because sometimes it can go too far. Sometimes everybody has their own personal preference here, but we let others shape us. We let others tell us what religion we are. We let others tell us what we're supposed to do, and we have that belief system. And so we can also hurt others so they don't hurt us first. We kind of numb ourselves to this whole thing, and we just do the daily thing, and we just live our lives the way we're supposed to, and we don't rock the boat. And we can carry, it could carry on with us, and it can be persistent with us, and it kind of hurts us. And so, but during this journey, whenever we suffer these kind of things, or when people tell us who we are, or we're supposed to do this certain thing a certain way, or anytime we suffer any kind of trauma or physical, emotional trauma, or we can't be who we are because somebody tells us we have to be this way, part of our soul will disconnect from us, because we have an emotion attached to that, right? And that emotions are deep, and emotions have a lot of energy. And so because of that emotion, some of our soul disconnects a little bit. And we do this in order to survive the experience. We kind of disassociate ourselves from the experience so we can understand it. And again, this is kind of a protection. It's not a bad thing. It's kind of us protecting ourselves, or spirit protecting ourselves. And our soul's always there. It's just, it disassociates, and it's almost like, I want you to think of it as fireflies or little firebugs. So some trauma happens to you, and a little tiny firefly just flies away from you, or releases from your spirit, and it's about 2 or 3 feet away from you the whole time. It's still lit. Sometimes it can lose its light, but it's not completely gone. It's still there. It's just that you don't realize it's there. This is why a lot of times when we have trauma, that's why we do the flight, fight, or freeze. That totally has to do with it. And sometimes we run, we freeze, or we fight it. But those little fragmented soul, that part of our fragmented soul, kind of disassociates from us or stays in that area. Now, if it's really bad, it can stay in the area because the emotion, and that's where I feel like spiritual hauntings are. But that doesn't have anything to do with us and what, that's a different whole thing. But just like when people get like maybe murdered or go through a traumatic death, that emotion stays there and that soul still stays there because we still exist. And our soul moves on and our soul exists, but that part of us is still right there. And even on the other side, we're still always progressing. We're still always processing. We're still always learning, and we're still always growing spiritually. So we can still do soul retrieval on the other side. This is where generational work comes in. We still have parts of our soul that maybe are in our families and things like that. So when we do generational healing, those parts of our soul, those parts of our ancestor soul can be called back to them. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought that was super like aha moment for me. And how we can do some of this is it's called the process to retrieve our souls can be called soul retrieval or ensoulment. So in ensoulment, we develop an intimate relationship with ourselves, making our unconscious more conscious. So we kind of we make that veil that's kind of been between our consciousness and our conscious and our unconscious. We kind of thin that veil and we start to have an intimate relationship with who we are and what we are, and we start to trust ourselves, and we start to listen to ourselves instead of other people. Instead of other people telling us, you have to do it this way, we listen to ourselves. That's why comparison is such a thief of joy, because we're looking at how others are doing it, and we're looking at how others are doing things, and we think we're not good enough, or we think that we need to do it better. And looking at other people to do things or how they do things is great, but that's not you. And you might have a different way in everything, in your career, your mothering, all the things, parenting, marriage, everything. Just because some people do it one way, that doesn't mean that's how you do it. But when we try and do it the way other people want us to, or other people expect us to, or we see other people doing a certain way and we expect ourselves to do it that way, we lose a part of ourselves, and we lose a part of that soul. And so that's kind of where we're trying to grab these things back. We're trying to bring all parts of our souls back to us, to make us whole again, to make us healthy, to make us grounded. So now, a lot of ways that you can lose pieces of your soul or lose these type of emotions are what I just talked about, changing yourself to be like being told, being powerless. Because when we try and do things the way people expect us to do them, we become powerless. And we can do, like when you have a job, obviously you have to do it the way your employer thinks you should do it, but you don't. You always have a choice. You can go to a different employer. You can try and go to a different employer. You always have a choice, and I want you to remember that, because I don't want you to ever think that you're ever out of power or you've lost your power. You always have a choice. Now, if you decide to stay, that's up to you. If you decide to look for something else, that's up to you. Then we kind of start going into manifestation, right? So that's kind of a whole other thing. But the way that you can have a soul fragment is from any kind of abuse. Any kind of abuse. This is emotional, physical, sexual, any type of abuse that you feel intimidated, you lose your power, you're forced to do things you don't want to. This is a huge fragmented soul. And this is why a lot of children don't remember being abused, because they disassociate, and their spirit, they leave that emotion and they leave that spirit, they leave parts of them there in the moment, which is a lot of you are probably thinking that's crazy. And it is, but it's a protector. It protects us, because what happens is we recall it when we're ready to process it. Because when we're little, we We don't know how to process it. That's why a lot of people do inner child work, because a lot of these traumas or events happen when we're children because we don't know enough, or we haven't grown enough or matured enough to deal with these situations. Now, grief is huge. Grief is a huge soul part of our part, because we lose parts of ourselves. When we lose a person that we are so in love with and that we see on a day-to-day basis, when that person passes, we lose part of who we are. And so this is a big, and we lose control. We lose control because when that person is taken from us, we completely feel like we have no control over it. We have no control over our lives. We realize that we have no control. So that is a huge part of losing part of ourselves or losing part of our soul. Addictions. This is why it's not, alcohol and drugs aren't necessarily the culprit for lower frequencies. It's just that when we lose control of who we are, we give parts of ourselves to these lower frequencies, and we lose parts of our soul. And even in addiction, like you saw on the movie Ghost, when that guy was chasing cigarettes, he was passed over and he was still chasing cigarettes. I don't feel like he was still addicted on the other side, but that's that soul fragment. That was part of his soul. He's in heaven and he's doing good, but that part of that soul fragment of his soul was still left in that addiction. And so until he calls that back, it's going to kind of be there in that subway place looking for cigarettes, because that's part of his soul fracture. That's part of one of the lightning bugs that disassociated from him or disassociated from him. Disconnected from him. Anytime you have an altered state of consciousness, this is, if you don't go into this with a good intent, so this could be any kind of not meditation, but any kind of like near-death experience, or any kind of when lots of LSD or those kind of drugs can cause this too, when your state of mind is altered and you're kind of in a different realm, because that is kind of scary. So if you do astral traveling and you have a bad experience or things like that, an altered state of consciousness, like when you're out of body and you have a different kind of, it can kind of traumatize you, or it can be good. It just depends on, I think, the experience, because if it's fearful, of course, you're going to leave a soul fragment there, because that emotion of fear is so strong. This is why fear is so strong. Being forced against your beliefs. This is something, if you believe in something and you're forced to fight against it, this is the way this totally disassociates you, and this you totally lose parts of yourself and parts of your soul. This is why some people, like lots of abuse training or armies or things like that would, make people go against their belief system, because this is a huge control tactic. This is, and you lose part of who you are. And honestly, if you go back to this, most of these are losing control of who you are. When you lose control of who you are and you're forced to do something, this is when that soul fragment leaves you. The next one is rejection or abandonment. This is huge, because again, you've lost that control. You can't, when someone just ups and leaves you, a family member or someone that you love dearly, or when someone rejects you, this is a lot of child stuff. We feel rejected and abandoned a lot as a child, and so we can lose fragments here if it's too severe. Any type of fear, shock, or horror. So any kind of accident, automobile accident, any kind of like physical accidents that you get in, you can leave your soul fragment there. Any kind of, if even just like being scared out of your mind, like just like going in a haunted house and having a huge fear, or being scared or shocked. Because fear is such a strong emotion. The only thing even stronger than fear is love and gratitude. But fear can knock you. Can knock your fight, flight, or freeze syndrome in, and so that's when you kind of can lose that part of you. Any kind of unhealthy relationships. I think this kind of follows under abuse, maybe. So any kind of healthy relationships where you lose part of yourself, where you lose part of, controlling controlling relationships, any kind of that part, that's where you can kind of run into kind of disassociate and lose a little firebug of your soul. Now, these are some of the things that cause us to disassociate or to cause a soul fragment or to lose parts of us in different places. And these fragments create our shadow selves. That's why you do shadow work, because all of these fragments and all of these little disconnected firebugs create your shadow self. And this is why people are so big into shadow work, because you're trying to figure out how to call those pieces back to you. And the only way that you can call those pieces back to you is to acknowledge that they're there and accept them and process them one at a time and bring them back into the light. So these little firebugs, every time your soul goes through this, parts of your light, because everybody has a light within them. It's either your aura, your light of Christ. Everybody has a light. And when you have a soul fragment leave, this little firebug leaves and stays about 2 or 3 feet away from you, but loses its light. And so, or it could still keep its light, but it's just not part of you. And so when you do shadow work and you do healing, you're calling these firebugs back into your light and you're becoming whole again. And so it's not a bad part of you. It's just a part that you at one time of your life either did the flight, freeze, or fight, or you had a trauma and you disassociated from it, and now you have to do shadow work to call it back and retrieve it. Now, and sometimes those shadow works can stay on earth. If you don't resolve them on earth, they can stay as part of your spirit. And then when you're over on the other side, when people do generational work, then it can be called back to you. And I don't really want to say that somebody else has to call it back to you, because you're not powerless. But sometimes when there's generational stuff that's been passed down, and somebody on earth changes it and makes it different, then all those people who went through it can call back or feel wholeness again. And so I want you to, these are called triggers. Anytime you start to have a panic attack or anxiety, it's because something is triggering that soul fragment. Something is scaring that soul fragment or that loss. And so we got to figure out what those triggers are so you can pull those back. So after we kind of take a break for just a second, and I'm going to tell you about some things I got going, I'm going to tell you how to call those parts back to you. So stay tuned. Okay, so if you don't know, I have a Shopify account. It's under my Instagram. If you go to my Instagram, I think there's a link to it. It says shop here. You can get mugs and t-shirts and meditations and sweatshirts, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be adding more stuff to this, so kind of keep an eye on it. Right now it's a little bit sparse, but it's still there, and I'm going to add more meditations there. And also, if you are not part of my Patreon group, you need to go. It is awesome. Every month we get a monthly message. We get a weekly reading. We get a moon ceremony. We get a monthly meditation. In fact, this month it's going to be on Soul Retrieval. And you get all these things every single month, and you get questions with Carrie. You get a spirit circle online, a free spirit circle online, if you're a part of this Patreon group. So it is awesome. There's also a place in Discord where we connect and talk to each other about different awakenings, and it's getting bigger every day, and it's awesome. And also too, if you are going through a spiritual awakening and you need help with this, you can go to my website, go under courses. I'll have the link below in this podcast, in this episode. You can get an 8-week course on how to deal with your spiritual awakening. Every week you get a new theme. There's a theme about the clairs and how to use them and which one's your strongest. There's a spirit guide week, a theme about that. There's a theme about how to, all your chakras and how to align your chakras. There is a theme about protection, and there's a theme about how to connect to your spirit guides, and a meditation comes with that. So if you're going through a spiritual awakening, go to my website, the course Awakening Your Senses, and that should help you with that. Awesome. Okay, so I want you to remember that this soul retrieval or this soul infraction or these soul fractures, they're actually a gift. They're used to protect us because we cannot process at the time what's going on. So this soul thing happens, this disconnection happens so we can process it. So once we accept it and once we know what the triggers are and once we know where they're coming from, then we can take our power back and we can understand the triggers, which helps us to become whole again and to become ourselves again and become our authentic self. And this is why it's so important that we become who we want, who our authentic selves want. And this is why it's so important to not judge others, because when we're judging others, we're honestly just jealous that they get to be who they want. And we are not. So anytime you judge somebody or you get jealous of somebody, I want you to really step back and see, why am I jealous of them? This is why a lot of people say it's a mirror. It reflects back to you. Because if you are jealous of somebody doing something, it's because you can't do it, or you have been told you're not supposed to do that, and so you create that jealousy. And it's unhealthy because it's just really you saying, there's a part of me that I want to be that I can't be. And you have to hold that back. And so you're jealous that they get to be that part. So I want you to just really watch that. If you find yourself being jealous or comparing yourself to others, things like that. So grounded, grounding is really, really good to help you with that. But when you get your soul retrieval, and you start to understand your triggers and you start to understand the healing process of it, it helps you to be more grounded. It helps you to be more centered. It helps you to be more at peace with who you are. It helps you to follow your purpose. It helps you to manifest things easier. It's really hard to manifest things in your life when you're not at peace with yourself. When you can't attract things, you attract what you are. And so if there's chaos inside of you and all these soul fragments around you, then you're going to attract that. So you need to be at peace and grounded and feel your authentic self and to call these parts back to you. You're going to be more energized. You're going to feel more of an awakening, a spiritual awakening. You're going to see more clarity, kind of figure out your purpose. You're going to get better sleep, and you're going to have a sense of belonging without having to have the approval of everybody. So you're going to be able to feel like you belong somewhere and not want to have their approval. So because you accept yourself, that's the most important thing. God and you accept yourself, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what anybody else. So on your soul retrieval journey, I am going to have a meditation. I use it for my Patreon. My Patreon people are going to have free access to it. I will put it in my Shopify sometime this month, and it'll probably be like $2 or $3 to download. I'm going to figure out how to do that, but we're going to start a soul retrieval journey. And the way that you can start a soul retrieval journey, I'm going to give you different ideas on how to do that. But just so I want you to know, this was a big thing for me. When you kind of start your soul retrieval, remember that thing that I called that, you disassociate and it protects you. Well, we also have an ego that protects us, an ego that's always telling us, you can't do that, you're not good enough. Because this ego kind of protects you. You can't really, for people who are like trying to get rid of their ego completely, we need it. We need it to stay safe. We just need to work with it. We need to become friends with it. This is kind of shadow work. So when we start, it's part of our shadow work. So when we start to do our retrieval journey, our soul retrieval journey, and start to work on our shadow work, then sometimes these things, these little firefly bugs, can manifest as our own demon. And this was really interesting to me because it can manifest as a demon, as a monster, as something very scary. And because your ego's like, you don't want to go there. This is too scary. It's going to be too painful. You don't want to go there. This is why some mediums don't believe that there's evil spirits out there. They believe that it's your own making. It's things that happen to you that that your ego doesn't want you to see, so it manifests in this way, which I feel is very interesting. Do I feel like there are still evil or lower frequencies out there? Yes, but I think they're probably soul fragments from other people that left their soul fragments there. And there are, people out there who are demonologists who do believe that there are demons. But I kind of do believe now that some of the shadow work or some of the things that I encountered sometimes were during my shadow journey were trying to stop me and that's from going further into my journey. And that's the same thing as like when you're trying to do good and you're trying to step into your power and you feel like something's trying to stop you. It really could just be yourself. You feel like it might be something evil, or you feel like there might be lower frequencies pulling you down. And this could totally be true. But it also could be parts of your ego or parts of yourself that don't want to take this journey because it's scary. And they don't want to take this journey, so they try and pull you back. So sometimes when you start your awakening journey, or when you start your soul retrieval journey, if you kind of run into these scary things, just make sure, just be open to the fact that it might be your ego or yourself creating these to protect yourself from the pain, which I felt was really interesting because it's that manifestation, right? If you're scared to go on this journey, or you're scared to take this journey, it can manifest into some type of monster. So, and it can manifest into something scary, or this could be like, like in monster form, in spiritual form, whatever your fear is, it can manifest in that way. So be really careful when you start your journey, your soul retrieval journey, that when the obstacles that you're facing aren't really you yourself. Okay. And they can literally show up as, you might think that they're scary things like shadow people or things like that. It could really be you not wanting to go into your own shadow work. It's really kind of hard to explain because I feel like there's both. I feel like there's both lower frequencies that are trying to stop you from excelling or raising your frequency, and I really feel like you can create some of these lower frequencies on your own because your ego is trying to block you from going further. Okay, so ways that you can help on this journey, or try and heal, or call your power back, or call these fragments back to you, these soul fragments back to you, are meditation, visualizing this journey. This is going to take more than one time. This isn't a one and done thing, but you can meditate, you can visualize your soul coming back to you. Again, I have a meditation on this that I will make available in my Shopify, but that is huge. Meditation. This is another reason why meditation is so important. And altered state of consciousness. So altered state of consciousness in a negative way can cause a soul fracture, but altered state of consciousness in a positive way can retrieve soul fractures. So this is breath work. This is why breath work has been so huge. This is why I'm certifying in breath work, because it's available for people to call back their souls, and it kind of makes an altered state of consciousness, and so it can call back. It helps you heal, and it calls back some of those soul fragments. Mantras. This is why affirmations and mantras are so important. I am confident. I am beautiful. I am strong enough. I am good enough. This calls back those little tiny firebugs. When they hear those little soul fractures that heard that they weren't good enough and kind of disconnected, they'll start coming back to you. So mantras are good. Visualization. This also goes with meditation. But sometimes meditation, you just sit and you just sit in quietness. Visualization is when you actually visualize your soul coming back to you. And also plant medicine. Lots of people use plant medicine. Now, so this is different than hallucinogens. So sometimes when you have a hallucinogen like ayahuasca or LSD or things like that, if you do any kind of plant medicine, I strongly suggest that you have somebody around you that knows what they're doing, a shaman, and when you do this, you have good intentions, because it could go either way, right? If you go in kind of nervous or scared and you have a scary experience, then you could again have another soul fracture. So what I want you to remember is you can use these things, but I have friends that do plant medicine and they love it, and lots of people heal from it. But this also too, remember there's a addiction. You can get addicted to anything. So an addiction can cause soul fragments. So just everything in moderation, and just always remember, you have the power within yourself. You don't need outside help for this stuff. You have it within. Don't look for outside help for this stuff. You have it within yourself. You can do this within yourself, except for sometimes I will say you can look for outside help with certified counselors and things like that to help if you're struggling with some of these triggers or struggling with some of these fractures. Always have a good intention. Self-love, and give yourself grace. Like always give yourself grace. Always give yourself some grace here. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just always give yourself. Love is the highest thing. No matter what, just love yourself unconditionally. And inner shadow work can be done when you do inner child work, when you do family counseling, and when you do generational healing. And I think like all of this kind of stuff, if you cannot handle this by yourself, or it kind of starts a lot of emotions that you can't handle, please seek help. Please seek guidance or counseling and someone who's certified to help with this. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about soul retrieval. It totally helps me. Before when I kind of first started and I kind of started doing my shadow work, I didn't really know anything about soul fractures until I started looking into hauntings and the paranormal, which was crazy. And I was wondering why I was getting led in that direction, because people would ask me what shadow work was. And I'd always be like, something that happened to you in the past that you didn't process. And so you got to process it now because you're remembering it. But this makes complete sense. It's part of a soul loss or a soul fracture, something that happened to you in the past where a little firefly left for a minute because it couldn't handle it. And now you got to pull that back in. And that's what your shadow is all these little fireflies that lost their light. And they're just wanting to come back. And so you got to work with that because they're creating kind of this, I guess, demon or monster thing that you've got to deal with and process. So I just thought that was such an interesting way of looking at it. And it helps me want to call all my fireflies back. It helps me want to call all the things back to me and become whole and love who I am and understand the shadow work a little bit better. So I hope that helps you guys. It totally put things into perspective for me. And it's so crazy to me that the way it came to me is when I started looking towards paranormal, because I never thought in a million years I would go in a paranormal direction. And I had this, spirit point me in this direction of paranormal stuff, and it fascinates me. It's so crazy. And when I was looking into it and I saw soul fragments and soul retrieval on a haunted perspective side, I thought, okay, then it's got to be part of this too. And I looked more into it on our earthly lives. And shamans very, very much believe that when we were sick or ill, it was because we lost part of our soul. So it's about calling that back. And that's what our journey here is to do, is be whole and to be our authentic selves and to love ourselves and to heal ourselves. And so part of this journey is to start that. And is this soul retrieval part of past lives? I would think so, probably. I'm guessing yes, but that might be something that I might be look farther into too, because I was always kind of taught that the past is the past. You don't want to dwell on it, and we don't really look into past lives. But some people look into their past lives, and they see different things that help them heal here. And I can't help but think that that's a soul retrieval. That's a soul retrieval. So parts of your soul, you're receiving that. You're receiving that part of your soul. So I love you guys so much. I am so grateful for you. And I know that this journey can be hard sometimes, but I just remember that you're not alone. You have guides and family to protect you, and communities. Try and find a community that will help you, or so you don't feel so alone, and you're not alone, and you have spirit guides and loved ones that walk with you constantly. And I love you guys so much. And always remember, always, that you believe what you want to, and let others do the same, and always be kind if they don't. If you liked this podcast, please post and share with your friends and subscribe so you never miss an